Hi. So today I would like to share a story specifically about a challenge that I experienced and that I overcame that I think that a lot of women in a lot of different, all across the world, all across different experiences might go through. And so I'm just going to talk about my divorce that I went through. So this was a very sort of toxic relationship. It was taking a toll on my mental health. And I made that decision, just, as the rubber was meeting the road, I just kind of made that decision to, end that relationship. And it was very difficult, right? People, in psychology talk about how divorce is akin to like a loss, like a loss of a whole person, right? Even though they're still living, it's your connection to that person, as well as all the dreams that I had, all of the aspirations that I had, and sort of building this future with that person. I had to like let go of that, and that was very difficult, right? It was very much like I had to kind of reimagine who I was, kind of find a new center. And even knowing that it was the right decision, and even knowing that it was the right thing for me to do, it still was very difficult, right? And I didn't always have that certainty, but once I had that certainty, I was able to move forward and make that decision. But it was still, it was very difficult to kind of navigate that kind of huge life change. And so I think that, a lot of women, who might interact with Tellapy, probably have experienced something like that, even if you're not specifically married, just any type of like relationship ending, right? Whether the other person or you, or it was mutually decided upon, no matter what, like relationships where you've invested time and care and love, when that ends, that can be very, very difficult. And so that definitely was for me too. It absolutely was. And so I'll talk more about sort of how that experience affected me, and if I have any more advice, for people that are going through this type of thing. So, the thoughts and emotions that I had during that time, I mean, I went through so many different waves of thoughts and emotions. Um, I think that some of the thoughts that really came to my mind, I definitely had, thoughts of self doubt, of being disappointed in myself, of kind of questioning myself, and just feeling like, yeah, just feeling like the failure of this relation of my relationship represented some failure of me. And I know that doesn't sound, it doesn't make sense, but that, even though it doesn't make logical sense, that emotional feeling of like, this ending is like a reflection of me, right? A reflection of my failure, to just, whatever it could have been, is just, I felt like the ending of the relationship and that failure kind of reflected on me as a person. And so I deeply like internalized that. And That's definitely like some thoughts that I was having like earlier on. As I mentioned, I definitely had that sense of grief. I remember it felt very much like, um just like a hollowness, an emptiness, like, oh, like, in the same way that, there was definitely that heartache piece that, people experience, women experience. And so it was kind of like, just like a little tug in my tummy and my chest, of like, ouch, this hurts, right? And so yeah, I had, basically, yeah, that self-doubt, that disappointment in self, that heartbreak, that grief. But then, it wasn't all of that. Those were like interspersed with other feelings, like a deep sense of relief, right? Like I think that especially with the nature of it being like a toxic relationship, which a lot of women experience, I think that there was like a deep sense of relief. There was a sense of freedom. There was a sense of um I think there was a sense of like empowerment in terms of like, what am I trying to say? Yeah, there was like a sense of like empowerment because it was like you did so much to try and make this relationship work. And you did so much, you put so much energy into it. And having the courage to step away, like I just felt some of the thoughts that I was having was just like, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you, girl. Like you did that. Like, you don't know what the future is going to hold. You don't know how all this is going to work out. And even like the very specific nuts and bolts of the divorce was like, okay, how do I find a lawyer and all this different stuff? And not knowing what that process is like, or all of that. But I think there was a sense of like relief and like feeling more empowered that I had um had the fortitude to step away, right? To make that step. And so yeah, I think it was a mix, right? And I think that's something that um isn't always talked about because um I did have all those feelings of sadness. And like when I would talk to other people, they'd be like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. You must be so sad. And it was like, yes, but it was just, I'm not sure that the way that people think about divorce, you know, always has those kind of mixed emotions that come about, those feelings of both sadness, but also, excitement, right? Or not exactly excitement, but like relief and freedom. Um and yeah, it was messy. And over time I feel like it kind of leveled out to really just be the grief and the sadness kind of released. And then it was just kind of more on those sort of positives. So I think in some ways that was definitely like the stages of grief, right? Like moving towards like acceptance. And that takes time. Okay, so this last, question, what would I like to say to someone else who is going through a similar situation right now? So if there's someone out there that's going through the end of a toxic relationship, or is going through a divorce of some kind, I think that the thing that I, would say to my, younger self is just like, I am so proud of you, right? This can be something very difficult, but I am so proud of you for making that step, for choosing yourself, for moving forward, for, just dealing with this difficult thing. And something that I am so thankful for is that I did have a community of friends and family who did offer that space to listen. And so that's something else, more, I would both say, I'm so proud of you, but I also would say, if you need someone to talk to. And it can be a very lonely sort of process, right? Because it's with a divorce or a relationship ending, it's someone, you're losing someone that was like, there can be that feeling of loneliness. So I think that just being like, I'm here to listen, right? I'm here to talk. And I think even if you don't have someone, because people are busy, people have lives, and so when you're really going through it, there's not always going to be someone right there. So I would say, even just something I would also say to someone going through a divorce or a relationship ending is like, talk to yourself, right? Like do if you can, do some journaling. Because it's like that self listening, that something about the act of writing kind of solidifies your truest kind of thoughts, your truest emotions. And that's something that you might be able to look back on and be like, oh wow, this is what I've overcome, or this is where I was, or this is what I was feeling, and just like have a compassion for yourself. So what I've said so far is like, I'm proud, like you did that. Be proud of yourself for going through something really challenging. I'm here to listen. And then, maybe think about journaling, right? Because, I think what I really like about the Telepy is that it's about storytelling and trying to improve mental health in ways that don't just rely on therapy. Because I think therapy can be beautiful. It can be such a lovely process, but it's like, what are those other things, those other resources, right? So, like, journal. Other things I would say to someone going through a divorce or a long term sort of relationship ending is try to tap into the things that you have loved since before you were with that person, right? So if there's like a specific a music type, that, or some music from your childhood, or some music from your younger days, like tap into that. Because I think with the loss of a relationship, right, you're kind of like, this is what I experience, right, is you'll have like a lot of associations, like, oh, um my old person like this type of food, or that reminds me of them, or all these different kind of little things that might remind you of either that person or the times you had together. And so I think that a beautiful thing that someone can do is just reconnect to themselves, reconnect to their interests, reconnect to the things that they love, that aren't attached. It's really just like becoming, just building up that independence, building up that love and that self-compassion, that extends beyond any type of relationship, that's really about you and your relationship with yourself. That does go to the journaling, but that's also, it extends beyond the journaling, right? It's just like, tending to your heart, spending time with family and friends, not isolating yourself if possible, seeking that support, whether it is through therapy, but also through, talking with people. And then just, yeah, just having self-compassion, loving on yourself. And yeah, I think all of those things those are things that I, kind of found through my process. And those are things that I would love to say to someone going through a similar situation.